Welcome everybody to now, I think what is today, the 38th episode, if I may call it that way, of SaaS Talks. I'll give a quick introduction to SaaS Talks itself, which is that this series was created not to, and I emphasize again, not to talk about any rags to riches story that we were so small and we are so large. It is usually a functional topic, which means that some element of building a SaaS company that hopefully you can begin to think about or apply on a Monday morning. And these topics can be therefore very different, are usually functional topics. I'm going to introduce both the topic today, the format, and the two anchor guests here as well. But the topic for today is about what are the transitions you make as a SaaS company when you go from SMB to the enterprise. And while I know different people may have very different hypotheses, at least we at Stellaris believe that most companies in SaaS usually move up the ACV curve. It's not always 100%, but most of them end up, you might be starting with an ACV of 3,000, then 10,000, then 20, then 50, then 100. Those journeys are very common. And in the process, you often end up going from smaller customers to larger customers. And the intent of the discussion today was to focus on different aspects that change from your product/engineering to sales to customer success. So essentially, what changes as you do this? That was the idea. Just to set the context, also, this is usually done as a discussion. We wish we had a large room where we could all sit around the table, which we can't. But the idea is that Shantan and I, who are from Stellaris, we will set the stage with our first few questions. And then the idea is that we will be driven largely by questions coming from the audience. Of course, we will chime in from time to time with our questions as well in between. A couple of other pointers, which is that please stick to the topic. Very often we find people asking other questions. And with that, let me just introduce the two speakers. I'll begin with Satya first. Satya, I have known from now 2014, a little bit over 10 years. We met at an event, I think in April 2014 for the first time. We ended up partnering in his first company that he built, which is PipeMonk, which was a company in the SaaS integration space, which he eventually exited to Freshworks at the end of 2016, did multiple roles, but for the longest time was the chief of staff to Girish there, and did a whole bunch of different functions at Freshworks, including leading many different products as well. And then recently started out a company called ScaleKit. In fact, it's the same PipeMonk team, which is now doing ScaleKit as well. And the idea of that company is, again, to help SaaS companies migrate from SMB to enterprise on their engineering/product side. And we are going to touch upon that multiple times as we talk about it today. And thank you, Satya, for being there. Satya is joining us from Seattle. Deepak, I have known ever since I've started at least my venture career, which is since early 2013. Deepak is the co-founder of Mindtickle, prior to which Deepak was at PubMatic, which was actually also a company from my past days at Helion. It was a portfolio company. And Deepak has, of course, built Mindtickle from what it was at that point in time to the company that it is today. Been one of my regrets, if I may say so, which often happens in SaaS talks, by the way, that we often get guests who we have not backed in the past. But Deepak is joining from Pune, and thank you so much for joining, Deepak.
Thanks, Alok. Nice to be here.
Yeah, thanks, Alok. Thanks, Satya, Shantanu. Nice to meet here. And it's a little bit generous introduction, I would say. And if one line I will say for Alok, early days, of course, we thought was investor and the founder, but now it's a mentor-mentee relationship. So he's a very good friend and mentor to us. So that's the relationship we have.
Yeah,
Thank
same here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. With that, we will kick it off. And Shantanu and I are going to put in our first couple of questions each before we open it up to the audience. I'm actually curious to start at a generic question, which is that as you think about the transition from SMB to enterprise itself, and even though I made the belief statement that I made, I'm actually curious, both of you as founders, what is your belief statement that does one even need to transition? And if one does need to transition, what forces that transition to happen in the first place? And either of you, both of you have been through
Yeah.
large journeys, so please feel free to take.
Yeah, so I'll probably take a first pass and Deepak can chime in definitely. I think at the high level, not every company starts in SMB, right? Because there are problems which are actually enterprise first problems and mid-market first problems. I think one of the misnomer is that enterprise is always a journey that you start from SMBs to mid-market to enterprise. It is, yes, I mean, when you are starting at SMBs, that makes sense. But if you take an example of maybe a sales compensation management, sales compensation automation is not a painkiller for an SMB, right? It makes more sense for mid-market and enterprise. But then if you're building maybe a CRM for SMB, that can probably start at that level and go up to mid-market and enterprise. I think that's one clarification, that there is always two parts to it. The second one is, I think within each of these journeys, yeah, I mean, it's always a function of feedback from the customers and feedback from the market, especially at least at Freshworks, that's how it was driven, where we went through most of our journeys from SMB to mid-market to enterprise. And most of the roadmap and also the capabilities that were built were predominantly a function of which market we were targeting and what feedback were we getting from the outside in. I'll hand it over to Deepak.
No, thanks, Satya, and you rightly put. I think the problem statement, that what kind of problem statement you're solving, that matters a lot. Are you solving a kind of a generic problem that the scale is SME to enterprise more common? When you're solving a specific problems, maybe the vertical, like for example, if you think a vertical SaaS or vertical solution may not be an SMB. So there are so much nuance in that part. And also, and I'll share from our experience what made us push from SMB to enterprise. So uh, I think we were not in SMB, like small, we never been. We were like typically Series C onwards from the day zero. But and as if many of you know, the space that we are in, first time Forrester ultimately published a wave, and next year Gartner is going to publish the quadrant. So maturity wise is quite new. So there's a lot of consulting mindset needed in that space. When we started in that space, we realized that the amount of serving that the cogs, you can say, the effort that we need to make the account successful of a 30 account versus a 200 account is the same. So taking that other factors, that hey, how much time it takes to, in fact, for example, acquire that customer and to serve the customer, right? Is that also in cost benefit in that journey? So that makes sense. So that played a role back in 17 when we were like raising the Series B at that point, right? So that is the time we decided to switch to enterprise. It took, I mean, there's a long journey to be enterprise ready from all the access, but it took long enough time to be there from all the access. But the concern was from that angle. Hey, we had few enterprise, but we saw the conversion cycle and the serving was effectively not much different than the mid market and SMB. So the pivot was like to move to shift in that direction. However, there are times when company move from enterprises to mid-market, right? And that plays happens, many of you have seen. We paused the SMB mid-market for like, I don't know, many years, right? A year and a half, 2 years back, we got back into again to the mid-market. Reason is we grew our portfolio and then realized the amount that we can extract from mid-market is almost significant and similar to our enterprise, right? For different solutions. So it's like a trade-off that you understand with all these factors.
Understood. Deepak, given that you did make this transition in your journey at Series B, both on the product and engineering side, what were some of the key challenges that you faced?
Yeah. So I saw many times people think about, oh, enterprise typically needs the compliance part comes very obvious for everyone. Oh, enterprise means compliance, reliability. But there are mindset shift. So I'll come to the access that actually needed from, let's say, R&D point of view and platform point of view, and there are access was needed from the people point of view, the mindset. So
Yeah.
two are very, very important. If you look at access in front of the platform and R&D point of view is about of course, the security and compliance is one part. Reliability is another part. And nowadays 3949 is like given. And those point of time was like people used to hesitate. A lot of people should I put 99.5, 9.7, right? So having that is very, very important. And think of reliability as a number of elements like rollbacks, the way you do deployments, right? Recoverability, all of those factors matters in that access. Extensibility matters. Like many companies, when you move enterprise, they look for, you have data, but I want to play the data in my courtyard. So are you extensible to extract and build on? So that started kicking in time to time. And then it comes interoperability also. Interoperability is super, super important because their ecosystems varies and sometimes dynamic, right? So how flexible you are to integrate and interoperate in that ecosystem. So that's very, very important. Then it comes the mindset of feature development. Like I'm just giving a couple of small example of feature development, which feels very, when we go for mid-market SMB, like for example, our case. So company who is having maybe 100 million revenue might have 40, 50 sales rep because per year revenue is probably 30 million that you're probably adding, right? So you will not have 40, 50 more than 40, 50 AE sales reps. So let's say in a user management sections or something, you say, hey, can I list the users in various, if you're analyzing the user or analyzing the data, analyzing the performance and whatsoever, listing the user is very easy. But let's say now you move to enterprise. One of the enterprise have 7 lakh user. And if you are listing the 7 lakh user, what does it mean to them? Job is the same. Job is like, how do I find who is doing what? So list doesn't work. Search works, right? So that mindset of thinking and that direction is a switch the way you think of a feature, right? Sometimes you think performance, like many times when you're building an SMB product, you'll say, hey, do everything in front end so that it looks quick, right? And then once done, you save it. Enterprise, sometimes the 5 or 6 people are collaborating the same basis. And in the collaborations, like I'm collaborating, I'm putting something today, right now, 1 hour later, someone is doing some, right? So that the sync that you do from your front end to the DB or middle layer versus you think that way, right? It's a fundamental little bit shift and architectural point of view, design point of view. When you do that, that matters. I mean, beyond just the compliance elements, a lot of small thing that matters.
Satya, I would love to get that same view because you saw very many stable of different products at Freshworks. Some which must have been low ACV, some higher ACV, etc. And across segments you would have served. What changed? And let's begin on the product and engineering side between serving the enterprise customers versus the SMB customers.
Yeah. So I'll just take the same themes that Deepak took, but I'll cover topics which were not covered. I'll start with the product engineering first, and then I'll get to the other topics. I think let's talk about features, right? In SMB, it's okay to roll out the feature update to the entire product. Like every feature gets the same feature update. If you roll it out on Friday 11:59 p.m., everyone gets it on Friday 11:59 p.m. But in enterprise, it doesn't work that way because they would like to have a control on, hey, don't surprise me when you roll out a feature. I need to test it in my sandbox environment. And I need to approve the update that you have done. I have to go through my own security testing, or I have to go through my own internal testing. So give me something like a sandbox environment. Allow me to test the feature before you even. So you need to think about, hey, each customer may have a different deployment windows when you even look at feature deployment. And so that's one theme that as a product manager and engineer, so in terms of flagging features, because some customers may say, hey, I'm not ready for beta for this feature. I would rather wait for a GA.
Yeah.
So don't flag me for this. So how do you flag features? How do you deploy features? That's one theme that we have seen. The other theme that we've also seen is if you take dashboards and analytics, I think in an SMB world, the product manager defines what are the dashboards and analytics that you want to show in your product. But in the world of enterprise, it just gets complicated because they would have their own data warehouses, they would have their own data analytics systems. You are expected to support custom properties, custom filters, and you're expected to plumb the data to third-party systems like analytics or data warehouses. So a simple module like analytics expands such a big time in like the world of enterprise also. And storage, right? Again, a SMB customer may not care so much about where are you storing the data. But an enterprise customer would have so many requirements like, hey, my data centers are in Europe. So your data needs to be stored in Europe. And if it is actually a highly regulated industry, they may even go to the extent of it can't even leave my data center.
Yeah.
And it can even go to the extent of, hey, your software has to be deployed behind my firewall. So you need my permission to even update your patch or your software that you want to do, right? So those are some of the themes that we have seen in the product. But to go back to the access that Deepak started on infrastructure, I think beyond 4 nines, what they need is uptime guarantee. See, in SMB, you can claim 3 nines and get away with it, even if you are 2 nines and a 7 or a 2 nines and a 8 in a given month or a given quarter. But an enterprise will expect sort of like an SLA guarantee, and they expect the report. So if the report doesn't meet the guarantee, there would be even penalty that the company has to pay for it, right? So and infrastructure is also turnaround time. You go down, what's your turnaround time to come back? In terms of recovery, there are also SLAs for recovery and also standard operating procedures for security vulnerabilities. So infrastructure is the second piece, right? I think the third piece is probably billing. SMB would just swipe their credit card.
Yeah.
They would put the credit card and do it. And billing gets complex in enterprise where there would be offline billing, custom cycles for billing, and how you collect money, how you raise invoice and all that stuff. So I think like Deepak said, the product access, the infrastructure access, the finance, legal collection, it just touches every access which is out there. And
Great. Shall we? I know there are a bunch of questions which have started coming on the Q&A panel, and I encourage everybody that
Yeah.
Either just raise your hands and we'll actually bring you in here, or put your questions on the Q&A panel. Let's actually begin with the question from KP. Either of you can take it, which is that how do you differentiate between SMB, mid-market and enterprise? Is it locations, revenue, number of people? Are there any thumb rules in the way you can predict the behavior of what constitutes these tiers?
Generally, people follow about the headcounts. I mean, it's a proxy. Like more headcounts, that means it's a complex processes, right? So generally, like people go for and there's a nuance you can go further down. Generally, go for like any company who has more than, let's say, 2,000 employees is fall in the enterprise category, right? Any company is, let's say, above 500 or 400 employees to like 2,000, you could call it a mid market, and below is like SMB. So that's a kind of a classification. One of the way to think about, not that way, in the like, what's your user base? Like you need to the character. Let's say, for example, we are in the sales space, by the way.
Yeah.
So we look at generally the volume of salespeople. Like, is it where the processes changes? So that way, is it 500? Is it 200 employees, right? So you play by knowing the nuance that, okay, even if the 200 people, that means 30% or 40% is a sales team. So the process will change, right? So you know that you add that your industry nuance in that. That's the layman way, or simple way to articulate.
I'll just add one nuance, just to encourage the startups which are also early in the journey. Just adding to what Deepak said, you also have to look at, is your software getting deployed org-wide, or is it one function or a team within the organization? I'll take an example. If you look at software like Google Docs or email or Slack or CRM, so these are org-wide deployments. You don't usually see a company with a CRM used only in one department or one team versus that doesn't happen. But if you take an example of a customer support software, it's possible that a large enterprise may actually have 10 business units within it. And there may be an emerging business unit which is just budding up, and they may have an empowerment to make the decision locally for them to actually deploy the customer support software in their business unit. So don't be straight away just because the logo is large. Doesn't mean that they're an enterprise. For practical purposes, it can still be a PLG model where someone is discovering you on a G2 or maybe discovering you on search. So keep a nuance about, is your deployment org-wide or is it just in one particular team?
Sorry, just to chime in between, you need to aware who is buying this. So enterprise by design doesn't go, except few, doesn't go org-wide deployment. I mean, we've seen for the last 10 years, it doesn't go org-wide immediately, right? It generally, if the contract cycle is 3 years, you take 1.5 years to in fact reach that place, right? And then a lot of lobbying, alignment, even budget sourcing for that goes for that line. The nuances here, who is buying? So that complexity increases. Like if you think of a kind of a purchase cycle, smaller or large, is who is buying, and how easy it for buy that, right? So then you figure out, should I involve in that space or not? Because the complexity can eat you also of in that cycle.
Yeah.
To I mean, you think like we had that mistake. We had a really mammoth enterprise, we thought, and the account size was like $11,000. We're like, what the heck we were doing, right? With this, so we had lived those challenges in past. So just judging this logically is very, very important.
Deepak, Satya, and this is again one question which has come up, and this is an interesting question because I think a lot of early stage companies face this issue. Whenever that they have built a product and when they go to sell to an enterprise, a lot of times enterprises ask for some sort of a custom development or some sort of a customization on the product or engineering side. And for an early stage startup, it becomes a bit difficult. Would love to hear your thoughts on any kind of a strategy to actually handle these challenges.
Yeah, should you even do it or not do it, actually?
So I think not do it is not an option, Alok. When you're dealing with enterprise, not doing it is not an option. The question is, what are the smarter ways and efficient ways to think about it at any stage of the company? And I'll just start and I'll ask Deepak to chime in. See, if you're a larger organization, for example, you may still be serving SMB or mid-market, but you're just transitioning to enterprise. If your product is matured enough to support things like documented APIs or things like marketplace app exchanges, right? So you can use the marketplace as a mechanism to open up your product and APIs and let the third-party developers come and build on top of that. But obviously, as startups, we don't have that luxury. We don't have those marketplaces and all that. What we have seen at previous companies was if you can invest in exposing your product even as a private API, it doesn't need to be well documented. It doesn't need to be like well written with complete developer documentation and all that. Even if it is a private API, but something, see, fundamentally, if the product is not extensible, except the engineer, no one can do anything about it. Because when you're sitting outside and you don't know anything about the product, you cannot extend the product. They cannot do anything about it, right? So the core basic need is basic private APIs, at least to bring in a third party. That's the first requirement. And the second one is there are tons of companies which are acting as professional services, offshore product deployments, and extended services teams. They're always either looking for partnership with things like Salesforce developer relation or like a Workday developer relation, large companies. But there are some small boutique engineering teams, even within India, who are willing to do these services. So treat them like product development services and bring them on like either retainer or bring them on deal by deal basis. So we tried two models. One model is, hey, customer, we don't have this, but I know this is very important for you. I will give you a pass-through fee. I will not take a single rupee from this. Whatever you pay the third party, but the third party will do this for you. And I'm only facilitating through API. So that's completely pass-through pricing, transparent both to the customer and to professional services. That's one model we have seen. The other model we have seen is a markup professional services, where you bring in the professional services team backhand, give them the private API to work with, but then you slightly mark it up a little bit of overhead, maybe 5% or 10% for the product and engineering overhead, but you still package it to the customer as if your team has done it, and you don't expose the third party to the customer. Both models work, but that's a starting point answer. I'll let Deepak chime in.
No, yeah, you dwell on the good points, Satya. So the little bit abstraction here. When you move to enterprise and when say custom solution, you need to question what does custom mean?
Yeah.
This custom for a right now custom, or is it a part of your strategy for next 2 years, 3 years? But you don't want to do right now, or you really don't see it anywhere. So you need to first understand, is it going to be your core or is it going to be periphery?
Yeah.
This is very, very important because the strategy changes. I just give you our example. We are in conversion intelligence example, right? So there are like hundreds of integration dialers you need. We don't have all the dialers. We are like 70 dialers, but still like suddenly we are something new, right? But do you know that the core is always about recording the calls, analyzing, give insights, revenue intelligence? That's a core. If that's a job they're asking and integration is a mean to that, you can't say no. So the knowing this part, what is a core and what is a periphery to doing that mean is very, very important. So you know, I need to invest versus I need to figure out something else, right? So this gives you the pathway to, should I have a control in future? Should I just not have control in future? So that's if it's going to be part of the core, you better have a control of it, right? If it's not going to be part of the core, it's always periphery, right? Better have a little bit different strategy. So that's our understanding is very, very important. The way we dealt two way. We internally, when we're not actually, when we moved to enterprise, our engineering team was 30 people team, not too large. And there are challenges you hit. Like, for example, you expect the same level of the extensibility with the service partners, and sometimes you don't get it, right? So knowing that if it's a core, do you want to hands off or hands on? That understanding is very, very important. So we did carve out some sort of called TechSol team. So think about TechSol is technical solutions stream. Maybe you don't need the same power level of engineers uh, uh, who could easily understand cost-wise could be half the cost of that. That is like an intermediate state where if you wanted to actually move towards extensibility to outside the world, right? So like knowing this periphery versus core and then thinking of a transition path is very important. And then if you know core versus this, that will also show that we can't say no, like data, like for example, okay, many times, trust me, I've realized not with Mindtickle also, but many companies also, people don't understand what enterprises do with the data. Just only see that, oh, they ask for the data, right? They're asking into the Tableau, then the Snowflake and something. We don't even discover what they're doing on top of it, right? That's a very, very important journey. Then you understand you can extract it. And in the today's world, look at what everybody is calling service as a software rather than the software as a service, is actually saying, hey, I will build end-to-end job for you. So if the customization is about, can I have a custom UI versus customization about, hey, I know your job is basically to see this data into in your workflow. So that's a difference that how do you attack the problem, right? So solving end-to-end matters a lot from stickiness. And then of course, if the customization is too much that it bulk your core and you can't move, that's where you need to be away. So little bit, it's a subjective for each business by understanding this. So
I was keen to add one more nuance in the answer to this, because in our portfolio, we have had 3 situations now where a very large customer came and wanted a certain customization or enterprise capability that did not exist in the product at that point in time. And one of the first lenses was what Deepak talked about, which is it long term? Does it fit into our roadmap, or does it actually not fit? Is it core to us? Is it not core to us? But what we were surprised, and which is why I wanted to mention this in this forum, is that in these 3 cases, actually the customer agreed to pay the money for you to develop that capability in the first place. So while very often it seems like a burden too, sometimes it's actually an opportunity, because somebody is actually giving you the R&D dollars for you to make that transition in the first place. And given that now I've seen it thrice happen in our portfolio in probably the last 5-6 years, it is not as uncommon as I thought it might be.
no, so our experience, many times what happened when, anyways, SaaS is going a different turn, but in a SaaS, we always thought that's investor pressure. Oh, SaaS, you can't have a service revenue more than 10%, right? I think we all need to forget this.
Yeah.
Right? We saw literally an enterprises work. It's not about, hey, can I commit to 3 years of the service? May not, but they do always have a significant cash chunk lying that, hey, I need to dump this out this year because next year it will go.
Yeah.
Until it ends and this money will go if I don't invest, right? So that's, a significant amount. We have seen like a $2 million, $3 million enterprise contract. There are $2 million of service sitting, and they say, hey, I need to spend this tool. I can't spend into SaaS because that's not the use case, but I can spend here and there, right? So, like that's also understanding. Many times we just bog down. Oh, how could we have 40% of the revenue coming in the service from that account versus the subscription?
So actually, that was going to be my question. Should some of these early stage startups actually start charging money from their customers for these kind of customizations in the first place? But Alok, you want to go ahead with the next set of questions?
Yeah, Satya, I want to take you back to one of the early answers you gave where you talked about different, for the lack of a better word, when you move your product from SMB to enterprise, what are the different things you need? You talked about feature management as one of the things. You are yourself right now providing auth as a capability. I know that many of our companies have had to go for SOC 2 compliance, some for GDPR, and there are so many of these different capabilities. This is not about a user-centric feature, so to say, but this is more with that because now you're selling to an enterprise, you need to have these capabilities in your platform. In your experience, have you seen any standard path or prioritization amongst these, or these will vary across different kinds of categories, and therefore your customers will tell you which of these to prioritize first and which of these to prioritize next?
Yeah. I think what we have seen, Alok, is let's probably look at it in two categories. One category is if you don't have these features, you don't get a foot in the door.
Yeah.
And the second category is, hey, these are either important to us as a company, or these are important because of the scale or because of any other nuance that they may bring it, right? So I think what are the ones that you don't get a foot in the door? Deepak touched upon this, which is the certifications. In 2025, depending on the geography, if you're US, SOC 2, if you're Europe, GDPR,
Yeah.
you are not having these certifications, you don't get a foot in the door, right? Now, let's look at the logic. Every company has to declare their sub-processors. And because the customer has to declare their sub-processor, whether they are compliant or not, and how is the data processing agreement happening, and are the sub-vendors, are they compliant or not? So it's become almost a table stakes in 2025 that if you're serving mid-market enterprise, certifications is like the category where you need it to get a foot in the door. The second thing I would put is data residency. Like if I'm a regulated organization in India, I expect the data center to be in India because my regulation says that my data cannot leave India, right?
Yeah.
So regulations play not just at certifications, because even at certifications, sometimes you can get away with some self-certified checklist or so. There are specific features, like for example, residency and the deployment style. So we touched upon this. There are generally three deployment styles: public cloud, private cloud, and on-premise. Then you go to enterprise, like true blue enterprise, the Fortune 2000 true blue enterprise. The conversation starts at on-premise. You can negotiate to private cloud, then you can probably negotiate to public cloud. So the deployments is deployment style, right? That's, I think the last one I would put is on single sign-on, right? Again, large enterprises, because their employees have to use your software,
Yeah.
and they have deployed stuff like Okta or Microsoft Azure. If like, they do not want their employees to come through passwords or through email and password-based login and all that, right? I think those are examples of like bare minimum that you need to do to get a foot in the door, right? Then from the second category, I'll wrap this up and give to Deepak, is after you solve for these four, the bare bones, then it varies, right? Depends on the product category, depends on the market context. But the broad themes are the following. The role-based access control, basically in terms of fine-grained access control and authorization, user activity logs, access logs, automating user provisioning with SCIM, custom reports, all of those things, they will keep varying depending on the context and the use case which is out there. Yeah, over to Deepak.
No, I think you captured really well, Satya. Just a little bit clarification. Unfortunately, there's a little technical nuance here, but a lot of us and customers also, so data residency, data sovereignty.
Yeah.
The real problem is data sovereignty, not residency. And the cloud companies also try to explain this, but unfortunately, it's so much like the business to understand that where is the sovereignty problem, where is the residency problem. We get lost always in that part. Because in the current scenario, unless you are like a gov cloud, it's not 100% resident. It's not, because the cloud front and all those we use, it's not 100% resident. So by design, it's not 100% resident. So, but that knowledge, uh, it becomes so difficult to explain people that, but that's one clarification. But the I would just harp on the second point that a little bit nuance that will about the product that you're offering. It's very, very important to know, and I'll give from our example itself, our space example. Like we operate in sales space. Any performance data for sales in Europe and especially work council in German is super complex. Like they go review, they can reject, right? And there's a layers, there's a dynamicity that which organization accept what kind of compliance in the GDPR. Like, oh, is it okay? Let's say my manager is Alok, and let's say Alok manager is X. Can X see my performance or not?
Yeah.
So it's a dynamic. Like some says only 1 degree, some says 2 degrees, okay, right? And that means the design, the way you design, the way you display, should it appear as a performance? And the same product you're probably selling into the US, North America versus there, right? So this is some of the design principle that how do you accommodate when it comes, knowing that product is very important. That's what many company takes time to in fact crack that area. If your product falls where the work council need to approve. So those are like a nuanced compliance that we need to see, and extensibility by design, even the logging. Like we see typically many companies even ask, okay, I know that audit log and all everything is with you, but I need this in my site, right? So that's a like extensibility, thinking of extensibility and interoperability is not non-negotiable as we move up. And nothing to worry that it has to be the day zero. You actually can work with them. Like, in fact, we have given like a 3 months, 6 months time during the contract that, okay, in 6 months time, we'll be ready by this, right? And they honored, those large organizations, they also honored for that.
Sorry, I'm tempted to ask a follow-on question then. I mean, as founders, and most people on the call here today are founders, you are also capital allocators.
Yeah.
Of course, you raise funds, but then the funds that you raise, you are actually allocating that capital to different functions within your companies. What you just talked about, both of you, sounds a bit scary, because sometimes even without adding a different business feature, I'm having to actually probably add a lot of R&D expense now for security, sovereignty, etc., etc. And we haven't even gone yet on the sales side in terms of what changes in your go-to market as you begin to go to enterprises, etc. It's not a very well-formed question, but I was effectively thinking, how much cash in the bank do you need to have before you undertake this kind of a journey? Is there a stage, or is there a checklist that you would say, look, guys, you better have XYZ with you before you try and make this transition? It's not worth it, or it's not feasible if you don't have those kinds of basics in place before you undertake this journey.
So I think I know the question was more on cost, but I'm going to turn it back to strategy.
Sure.
Where let's take an example of a company which is trying. I know you spoke about transition, but I'm still going back to the first category.
Yeah.
Maybe there are companies which are
Of
starting
course.
mid-market enterprise first, right? I say strategy because every company in 2025 doesn't need to address the world. They can start with one geography. It can be
Yeah.
US. And when you're starting in US, so it's the US compliance that is needed, which is SOC 2, for example. So everything comes back to priorities. So on day one, even if you have SOC 2, that's good enough. Like you don't need GDPR example, you don't need
Yeah,
ISO. Even in terms of data centers and residency, you can start with US data centers. You don't need European data centers and India data centers.
right.
And even with disaster recovery, day one, you don't need hot backups and hot cold and all that stuff. Like you can start with like one backup maybe a day and let the customers then take it. So I say strategy and priorities because whether you are transitioning or whether you are hitting enterprise, it's always a crawl, walk, run. The points that Deepak and I were making were more broader points, but if
Yeah,
you ask us to prioritize, I would say be smart about the business strategy. Don't need to win the world on day one. Pick the pockets that you're going after. If some of you are going after horizontal software, it's better to start with non-regulated markets. Like for example, if you're doing a horizontal software, you start with software market because
yeah,
software market is the easiest one to enter with a CRM or a ERP or HRMS. But if you're building a regulated, like if you're building something for hospitals or something for healthcare or BFSI or so, even there, you can start with pockets. Like you can start with like the high-tech banks, like maybe Silicon Valley Bank or a Mercury. You can start with that. You don't need to start with Bank of America on day one, right? So all of this comes back to the business strategy and the priorities. And all of us are scrappy startups. We don't have the whole wealth in the world. We don't need to conquer the world on day one.
No, very, very, very aptly put, Satya. I mean, we don't need to be afraid. I mean, I just told you, right? So when we really pivoted enterprise, our R&D team was 30 people team. 30 people team where we had significant large, super large enterprises. Nuance. But I mean, one level is how business priorities uh, is, and also the business leader and the founders nuance matter. If they're the expertise in that industry, then you probably know how to get like that's an edge that you have. So you need to leverage that edge. Like you, I mean, whatever the so anyway, R&D team is in support for the business,
yeah,
right? So if the business directions is giving that point of view, then they think that way, right? The point that you make, Alok, is like distribution. I think the in general distribution, which depends on which is heavy. Let's say if my core is distribution, then the distribution will be heavy on my investment point of view. If I have the tech business and tech is a unique, so the tech will be heavy, right? So it's possible that you spend 50% of your revenue on R&D in the early days, right? And that ultimately it has to go down to around 20s, right? So over few years. So that's a
fair point. Sorry, I was hogging all the questions, Shantan.
No. Just wanted to change tracks, and I know, especially when you transition from an SMB to an enterprise, one thing that definitely changes is your pricing strategy. Uh, as given at a 30-member engineering team, you guys did transition from SMB to enterprise, Deepak. How did your thoughts on pricing strategy actually change? In the sense that, was it a business unit level decision? Was it an enterprise org level decision? How did it change? Did you have a different team for it? Would love to get your thoughts on that.
so think about, I'll tell you, 17, we only had CS at that time.
Okay.
The for serving the customer, of course, account executive was landing and CS customer success was, and the customer success guy we used to hire is like they're doing everything, right? At that point of time, we broke that customer success group. We introduced professional services. We broke down professional services in the tech solutions and then content as a service, right? So that's a expansion started happening by knowing that enterprises where all they need support. So it's a very, very important to know where all they need support. And that's also a journey, by the way, right? And we realize because uh, it's not about 1% because there's a stakeholders are more in enterprise. Of course, one company is buying, for example, in our you it's a little bit surprising. Like for example, it appears like for a software they buy like one, and there are like hundreds and 400 people who is actually acting as an admin on our platform. So the volume is so large for like to support even them if you move an enterprise, right? So it's like itself a separate use case to like align them from project management, what priorities are, right? So we needed to expand the offering when we're moving from 1 or 2% who's supporting the platform versus 400 people who's supporting the platform. I don't know how many geos they're there, right? So we needed to understand and then break this offering and bake that offering as a service, like professional services service, right? Over the time, what we also realize, that's a journey that realize, oh, you need to charge support was free, right? Oh, support has to be to cover this up. Oh, 15%, it grew to 20%, right? Of your subscription. And then you give this, right? Over the time, we realize, oh, the technical queries are increasingly growing because the volumes are large enough, right? Why can't we just introduce a TAM? If I say, for example, we realize at certain time you need to have TAM, technical account manager, more often so that the CSM actually focus more on the business value proposition. So those are a continuous discovery that you need to introduce from that part. You have different, either you package based on the problem or you somehow add a markup. Like we say, hey, if you have 25% of a SaaS is a part of support, you'll get a dedicated PS, dedicated CSM, you get dedicated TAM, right? For all these problems. So there are different pricing strategy can work, but the expansion was needed actually. That is the first time we actually broke that CS function into so many functions.
Satya, same question to you, given the journey that you saw at Freshworks. I think it would have been an interesting journey.
I think Deepak covered all the good broader points. Your question had 2 points. One was the pricing strategies and also the models. I think Deepak covered the strategies. And see, models, we tried 3 models, right? One model is the tiered pricing model, which is the classic bronze, silver, gold.
Yeah.
And usually SMBs start on the left plan, usually enterprises start on the right plan, and mid-market is somewhere between, right? I think the best example is probably HubSpot or Freshworks, where you look at the tiered pricing model. We've also tried modular add-ons, whereon if there is a specific feature, like let's say if advanced role-based access control or maybe like a skim provisioning is a specific feature, we build that feature as an add-on and we kind of priced that module, right? I think one example is NetSuite has this good modular thing with analytics warehouse, CPQ, all of that. So you can look at the add-ons as like priced add-ons. And lastly, we always have the custom enterprise solutions. I think if you are adding whatever Deepak touched upon, dedicated support, service level agreement,
Yeah.
dedicated onboarding assistance. Because when you're onboarding, if you're moving from a large established CRM to your new age modern CRM, you need the assistance in terms of data migration. You need assistance in terms of building the same third-party apps that were previously built. And you need to take care of the mobile application interface, same as the desktop. So the onboarding in itself is like a 4-month project. And in that 4-month project, you will have to go through sort of like onboarding requirements. Then you also need data integration and migration services, very specific to making the go live successful. And post the sales is done, the TAM or the dedicated support, the premium support, all of that. So usually you package all of this in a custom enterprise solution. So the tiered and the modular add-on and this one, these are the 3 we tried. And
I just want to know one thing. Many times, if many early startup founders are there, we may be getting scary that if you have to bloat the org for that, right? How will it run? Trust me, you don't need to bloat the org. You need to definitely understand the roles, right? That these are different roles. Early on, what helped us to find the consulting mindset CSMs who could do all of this. So early on, probably need 4 or 5 such CSMs who's come from like more like an engagement manager mindset of consulting who does, right? So you can save that cost. while you experiment, figure it out. And those are people who can stretch 10, 12 hours, have a high level conversation with executives. So those actually helped us before, like, in fact, slowly bloating the sub functions.
That's a good point, Deepak. In fact, there's this joke, right? The John Clark opens sales at mycompany.com, support at mycompany.com. It's the same John Clark which is responding to sales at my company and support at my company. So the team feels as if there is a sales team, there is a support team, and then
Yeah.
there is an onboarding team. So, like Deepak said, there may be roles on the website and the email addresses, but
Yeah.
there doesn't need to be so many number of people there.
Yeah, the art of appearing bigger than who you are is so important, actually, as well. I know we're going to run out of time, but I was just still wondering if each of you can give your 2 cents on what changes in the go-to-market motion as well. I know it's such a broad topic, but given that we did not get a chance, and I think many people have put questions, it'll still be worth just to get your top line on that.
Go ahead, Deepak. I'll probably chime in.
I'm still learning, by the way. I mean, the
We all
market,
are, Deepak.
market situation every time throws a different dimensions, right? One thing that I would like to share what changes, and I would say two. One is multi-threading. There's no way if you skip it. So, and as a founder, we did a mistake to, in between, step away. You should not step away in any such deals.
Yeah.
Either figure out early, mid, not at the end, right? Mid process. So this is in multi-threading, figure out this part, not to go away. It's very, very important. Second is about, I realize, consultative, because enterprise people, they're also egoistic. Like, I'm a CIO, I'm a CRO, or I'm in this. I mean, this, like, you can't just rub that, right? So you need to you can't just throw a challenge that what you're not. So consultative actually helped, that even if they don't buy, they feel that, oh, they at least put a good fight, they build a repo, right? I'm meeting few CIOs and CROs who actually did not buy my Integral last quarter in my trip right now, right? So that's, I mean, these two is my learning. I mean, in summary.
Satya?
Yeah, I think I'll just clarify what Deepak meant by multi-threading. In fact, if many folks are new and early stage, it is not the technical topic that Deepak is talking about. This is the go-to-market multi-threading where
Yeah.
you may have 5 stakeholders on the company side, and you need to touch all the 5 stakeholders because all of them have a buying committee internally. Deepak meant multi-threading as in go and touch all these 5 stakeholders in different points with different value propositions, because all of them have a vote internally whether your software is getting deployed in their organization or not. And that's one. Second, make them feel premium, right? Like, even it can be like a small round table of like a 10-member or a 12-member dinner round table or a breakfast round table. Don't take them to KFC. Like, really take them to like a nice restaurant, right? And make them feel like, and usually folks may want to go to that restaurant, but they never got a chance to actually plan for their family dinner or their business dinner. It matters like how you show up for the dinner, how you like host these customers. To Deepak's point, they feel like they're taking a risk on us, right? Because we are small, and they're taking a risk on us in buying the software and in implementing it internally. And lastly, the support functions. A couple of support functions you can outsource. I mean, you don't need to have it internally. You need someone to solve for the contract management. The contracting becomes a big challenge. Even if you work with a part-time legal or a part-time person, take care of the contracting. Yeah, those are some final thoughts.
Very true. Plus one on the contracting. It's a complex. I mean, I was the legal for, like, and early days, I had to read a lot to be there. But I mean, It gets stolen on you if you don't. And many times the lot of nuance actually come back and bite you on the insurance part if you don't have the right insurance. That's also very, very important. And if you're not following, you say, I'll save my data for 70 days or 2 years, and it's a written contract and the process is not there. And for example, if it's not there, do you have the insurance for it? So those matters a lot. So this is a little bit administrative part, but important.
Welcome to the enterprise world. We always promise that we'll start on time and end on time, and we are at 10:30 already. So we will have to end the discussion, even though there are probably about 20 more questions on the panel, which we have not been able to answer today. But Satya, Deepak, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to everyone today. And thanks to all the participants as well for joining.